Welcome to the feature series, How Roger Penske Changed the Indy 500 on the Marshall Pruitt Podcast, which celebrates the most successful entrant at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway on the 50th anniversary of his first event in 1969. Presented by Cooper Tires, the Justice Brothers, and Bell Racing Helmets, a long-standing partner of Team Penske. This 15-part series spans some of the greatest drivers, managers, mechanics, engineers, and the man himself, Roger Penske, to document the captain's vast influence on America's defining motor race, the Indy 500, and in many instances, the sport as a whole. We'll also be joined by a reporter who covered Penske's Indy debut a half-century ago and some of his fiercest rivals, many of whom admit to being fans of the 82-year-old icon. Our guest on this episode of How Roger Penske Changed the Indy 500 is Robin Miller, whose very first Indy 500 as a Cub reporter for the Indianapolis Star fell in 1969, the same year as Penske's debut, giving the two titans of the sport a shared 50th anniversary. Robin Miller, we are looking at the influence and impact of Roger Penske at the Indy 500 since his and the team's debut 50 years ago. You were here for that. I wasn't even born yet. I still had another year and a half of conceptualization to go on. What comes to mind when you think about RP and the influence he's had on this facility, on this institution? You've been here for all of it.
Well, Marshall, he didn't just change the face of the Indianapolis 500. He changed the face of open wheel racing. His imprint is all over it, and his footprint's all over it. And when he came here, I knew who Roger Penske was, as URRC Driver of the Year, Sports Illustrated cover once. We knew who Mark Donohue was because he was a hell of a road racer. But I think I did a column a couple weeks ago, and Dan Luganbuehl walked into the old media center, and shook everybody's hand and passed out his card, and he had a tie and a coat on. And we're like, what? There were no PR people. And if you need to talk to Roger, please let me know, and we'll set it up. And Roger he always had a real nice sweater and pants and a shirt. I mean, Mario said it best. Mario said he just looked like class when he walked. He just looked. And Mario's like, I expected big things out of this guy because I knew what he'd done in sports cars. But I don't know that anybody expected. I mean, I didn't say it I didn't write it in the column probably like I should have. But when they would roll the car out every night, and they would polish the garage floor, and then they were constantly polishing the wheels and making sure the car was clean. And USAC guys are laughing at him like, what are you people doing? We're here for 3 weeks. Get serious. You're going to polish the floor, and that's just that regimented system. That's just the way they operated, and nobody was mean to him or rude to him or anything. I mean, they was very they weren't treated poorly at all. And Roger says that. It's just that it was such a culture shock because this is a bunch of fly-by-night, seat-of-the-pants racers for the most part. They had 3 or 4 guys in a crew, open-wheel trailers, and no one had ever been organized. No one had ever seen anybody be that organized. And sure, I think Donohue did a good job that year, but you still you weren't sure exactly. You're thinking, well, it'd be great if Penske stuck around and became a full-time guy someday. But when he showed up in 1971 with the McLaren, that's when everybody went, uh-oh, this guy's pretty serious. So I just think, in terms of, I guess if you took a step back, maybe you shouldn't be surprised, but nobody saw him changing the face of open wheel racing like he did. Nobody saw that.
What was the adoption time like? Because if we wind the clock back, knowing that RP and the imprint that team brought, it eventually covered over everyone and everything. What did you see in terms of the timeline for that being adopted, going from, okay, what kind of weirdos are these? What kind of college button-up guys are these trying to, come here to the Midwest and act out of the norm for expectations of Indy? Was there a point where you started to see others go, maybe there's something to it after all?
I just remember Dan Gurney saying, these guys will be serious players. because him and Roger raced, and him and Parnelli raced, and they both had high regard for Roger as a driver, and obviously then as an owner and manufacturer. But I think that everybody's doing their own thing, and your head down in your back. But I think 71, when he showed up, when he came with the McLaren, I think that if you weren't paying attention, you started then. But Dan was paying attention, and I'm not sure a lot of other people were, because, like I said, we still had dirt cars in the Champ Car division in 1969, and so you're kind of like, where's this going? Is this guy? Is he just going to be an Indy 500 guy only? And because Donahue's such a good road racer, and there's not that many road races in USAC. So, but no, it was just this complete and utter, not only changing the guard, but just the way he approached it. And to make a deal with McLaren, obviously I guess maybe everybody couldn't have done that, Marshall, but he was smart enough to go, these guys are pretty, they're Formula One guys, and in the face of open wheel racing is changing as far as aerodynamics are starting to come into play and things like that. So, I said in the story he's the smartest guy I ever met, but I think that's just a typical move of his, who he aligned himself with.
Obviously, Roger as the standard bearer for the team, we know. We can name a Mark Donahue as not just first driver, but from the driving and technical side was the Roger Penske of that portion of the company. Who are some of the other people that you got to know within their organization in the early years that you can look back to now and say, on top of Mark, on top of Roger, Carl as well.
Carl Kainhofer.
Right? But who are some of the other ones
Miller.
You look back and go, in these areas, these folks had similar impact?
Everybody had a job. See, there weren't specialists then, Marshall. You had 3 or 4 guys on a team, so everybody had to do a little bit of. Everybody was kind of a fabricator. If somebody crashed, everybody jumped in and helped fix the corner of the car or whatever like that. I think Roger's the first guy. Carl Kainhofer was his engine guy. Don Miller kind of oversaw everything. And then, look through the years in the last 20 or 30. Look at the turnover at Penske. Not much. His loyalty factor, the way he treats people, the way he pays people, the way he rewards people. And you look at the drivers, Rick Mears and Elio and Jill, and look at all the guys that Tom Sneva, even though they didn't get along, he helped Tom invest money and make, if you were a Roger Penske driver or a mechanic, you realize pretty quick, it ain't going to get better than this. I need to hang on to this, or I want to stay here.
You raise a great point that I'd love to hear some thoughts on. From the driver front, there are very few that I can think of over these 50 years, not just at the Speedway, but in kart and IRL, IndyCar Series today. There are very few I would pull off of the list of either Hall of Famers or potential Hall of Famers. There are a couple we'd probably say, all right, I don't know if Tarso Marquez.
Okay guy, okay driver. Yeah,
but just in terms of all-time Hall of Famer, maybe not. But the point being is, if you do start looking at that list, there aren't too many names to pull off where you go, oh, that was the monster of their day. Same thing, crew chief-wise, mechanic, engine builder, gearbox. That's also rather amazing. But I also think, although Rogers we've known has been, at the forefront on the commercial side and sponsorship, he hasn't wanted for much. You don't get that just because of money, though. Not everybody just shows up for a big paycheck. Speak to that about all the people that you go, holy cow.
Marshall, Bobby Hillin, Rick Gallus. They wanted to emulate Roger Penske. He was their idol. They wanted their team to be just like him. They wanted to build their own cars, and they did. And sadly, they went through all their money and eventually had to get out of racing, because you hit the nail on the head. You can have a lot of money, but you better know how to spend it. And when you look at him and you think about, I'm telling he was always 5 steps ahead of the posse. He picked Rick Mears. He watched Rick Mears run that theater, or for Teddy Yip. He had that old McLaren, So he watched him 2 or 3 times and like ran 4th or 5th in Milwaukee and Trenton or something, and offers him a part-time ride. Well, Roger obviously knows a lot about driving a race car because he was a good driver. So he picks him up. He picks Tom Sneeve up when he's driving for Grant King. Sneeve was fast, but you didn't know he was going to be. Paul Tracy has one race for Dale Coyne, and boom, he's in the Penske trailer. Let's talk about the future. So Greg Moore, God knows how many Indy 500s he might have won. Elio had a lot of potential. It was real. But was he in demand? Well, not necessarily. No. When Greg lost his life, Elio was walking across the parking lot, and they swept him into Penske's motorhome and said, "Hey, we want you to come drive for us." And that had to be and the whole thing happened in a couple of hours. But think about this, Marshall. How many times has he got it wrong about the driver? Not very often. Maybe never. Look at his championships and look at the Indy 500 and stuff like that. So I just think he's an amazing businessman. He's the greatest sponsor finder and keeper of. Not only does he find sponsors, they stay forever because he knows how to treat them. And he was the first guy that paid attention to, we are going to take care of our sponsors. First and foremost, whoever it is, Gould, Marlboro, Pennzoil, whoever we got, we're taking care of them. And he was the first guy that really paid attention to that and realized, we got to cultivate this thing. We don't want these guys around for 1 or 2 years. Look how long these sponsors lasted with him. It's just a testament to, it's such a professional, first-class, polished operation. It'll never be topped.
Since 1954, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway has served as the proving grounds for the world's most legendary helmet brand. From Jimmy Bryan to Mario Andretti and Helio Castroneves, Bell Helmets has and continues to protect some of the all-time greats. Follow the journey on social media at Bell Racing HQ or by visiting bellracing.com. We're celebrating Roger and the team this month. Speaking of celebrating, because I always just love hearing some of these stories from you, the perception I think by most of Roger is he must wake up and go to sleep in a suit and tie, hair is always perfect. This man must be just operating life as a church-going paragon, winner in the boardroom, drinks nothing but milk and says his prayers. You, Rob and Miller, have seen from time to time that our beloved Mr. Penske has also been known to cut loose a little bit. Not saying often, but you've seen Roger let his hair down once or twice.
Well, the greatest thing was there was a big party in Mexico City after the last race of the year in 80 or 81, and RP got hammered. I'm pretty sure he was laying on the I don't know if he was laying on the floor throwing up, but he was sick. Sneeva was sick. Everybody was throwing up. I don't drink, so I was trying to help the guy. Drive the bus back to where our hotel was, but I think Roger's he's an automatron. I've never seen anybody work that hard. He goes from continent to continent. He does business in airplanes. He's so driven by. He's 82 years old, Marshall. He looks great, and his mind is amazing. And so just to get Roger to just kick back and like the story I did, there was a really good picture I found of AJ Foyt and Roger, and he called me. He goes, can you give me a copy of that picture? I've never seen it. Sure, I'll get you a copy. He goes, he goes, I love the old days. They were so cool. Well, how could you not? Because as much as he likes, as dominating as his team has been, he liked the idea that he had his own car. And you know what was great about Penske? If his car didn't work, he'd go get a March or a Lola. You know what? His ego never got in the way of common sense. Whatever I got to buy to make these guys win, I'm going to buy. Well, how many, yeah, he had the wherewithal to do it, but he also had the smarts to say, hey, I can swallow my, if the Penske chassis is not that good, we'll go get something else.
Let's stay on this theme. We're sitting here speaking after the conclusion of the Indianapolis Grand Prix. We had our pal Mike Shank here just an hour or two ago with his first ever podium trophy in IndyCar. Had the bottle of champagne here, keepsakes for him. I refer to Mike as the people's champion because he's the realest guy among team, heck, probably the realest guy in IndyCar. Again, Roger has this reputation of this stately person, which he's earned, but there is a realness to him as well, where if you earn your keep, you prove that you are talented and committed, although you know he's the boss, he doesn't see himself as that man at the top of the food chain looking down. There is a real kind of eye-to-eye thing about Roger that I think for those who don't know him would be surprised to learn that, no, this guy's real.
Yeah, I mean, he walks into, people have told me he walks into a boardroom and says, addresses the first 8 guys by their first name. He's met them once or twice. And he knows all the guys on the teams and things like that. But you know what? When I got cancer a couple of years ago, he called me 3 times in the first month and a half and said, I can send a jet, I can get you in the Mayo Clinic, I can give you, you need money. He didn't have to do that. I mean, Roger and I, we threatened to kill each other once before the start of the Pocono 500, and, he didn't have to do that. And he's offered to help other racers that were in need. I know that for a fact. I asked him once to help a friend of mine, Larry Rice, when he got cancer, and I said, Roger, could you help him get in the Mayo Clinic? And he said, absolutely. Let me know. And, when Larry passed, it never happened. But I think what I think about Roger is that, he's pretty funny, because I sent him a picture once of him at Watkins Glen or something, and it was a Cooper. Maybe you saw the picture, a red car, Marshall Cooper with a badass engine in it.
Yep.
He goes, typical Penske, unfair advantage. I kicked their ass. But I mean, he exploited the rule book in 1994. He beat USAC over the head with it because he's smart. He got Mercedes fired up to always be out in front of things and to always, he's driven by success and winning, but he's the guy that kind of blended business with his pleasure, which was racing. Look what he's done. Look at how his business grew thanks to racing. I mean, on every level, he was a trendsetter. And it's what everybody aspires to be. Our pal Mike Shank and Ricardo Juncos and all these, they somehow want to get close, maybe not to that, but in that conversation, I want to be like Roger Penske. Well, when he's gone, brother, there is nobody like, I don't know who's, I can't think of anybody that's had the impact he's had and the success, and he still gets as big a kick out of coming here in May as he did 50 years ago. This is what he lives for. He lives for business, don't get me wrong, but the Indy 500 that's all he cares about. He really, I shouldn't say that. He loves his wife, Kathy, and he cares about his family and his kids, but this is the thing that occupies his mind, man. He wants to figure out how to win the Indy 500. You can win 5 championships for him. He don't care. He wants to win Indy.
Let's close on this. I competed against Roger for however many years when I was a mechanic or engineer or something on one of the rival teams that never beat him, but respected him, obviously knew him. You see him and you go, oh, gee, that's Roger Penske. It's surreal to think, at least in this new role where I have a reason to actually communicate with him, a relationship has been built. There's a relationship that goes back and forth. The two of you have known each other forever, and I know are much closer. That to me says something, Robin, because in many other sports, press, media, let's just say the folks not in your immediate organization, they're part of the background. You see it, you interact when you need to, but they're not really part of your organization. The fact that he extends real relationships to those, I guess, that he either trusts or otherwise, this is Roger Penske we're talking about. That still blows me away.
Well, Marshall, there was a couple times when I was not very fair to him in a column. I didn't give him a chance to respond. I just cut his heart out once after Milwaukee, and a couple times, it was very on my part as a journalist. It was I should have called him up, and didn't. And I always cheer. I wrote a column once. I said I can't watch him take another victory lap at Indy. It makes me crazy. They win every race, but at some point in time, you go, you know what? You got to give this guy some respect and some credit, man. He's unbelievable, and he puts this thing together. But no matter what I did to him, or as mad as we got each other a few times, he never held a grudge. If I'd go to Michigan, I always had a parking spot. I went to Nazareth, I had whatever tracking on. He was so professional. He didn't hold a grudge and go, I'll show that guy, because he knew, like, racing was my passion, and he knew I cared about it. And I think he's not a petty person. He's not like that. He's just too classy, and he's too professional. But I think what's interesting is that when A.J. Foyt walks up to a group of people, they all stop talking because it's A.J. Foyt. Same thing with Roger Penske. If the captain's got something to say, you better shut up and listen, because, and he's funny because if he wants to know something, I don't know if he just comes right out and ask you. He'll just kind of throw something out there, kind of circle the wagon and say, hey, well, what have you heard about this? That kind of stuff. And like we're going to tell him. I mean, there ain't much he doesn't know or he doesn't hear first, so you're not going to tell him anything new. But during the split, he would call me, or I'd be at a kart race, and he'd call me in and said, "What's going on? Are we ever going to get back to Indy?" It just made him crazy that he wasn't at the Indy 500. And then when he made the move, it changed. Obviously, the entire axis of open wheel racing changed because Ganassi and Murray Hall and Fernandez, and they all followed him. And thankfully, we're all back together, and IndyCar's got some momentum, and it's the best series in the world right now as far as competition. And again, does he win the most races at Indy? Does he win the most championships? Yeah, but he doesn't win all of them, and you don't. He likes to compete, and I think he kind of thinks it's cool that, you get a good car and a good engineer and a good driver, you got a chance.
Roger Penske, 50 years here at the Speedway. We're also celebrating 50th anniversary of Mario Andretti's win. Those are the two big things folks are, I think, thinking of this year at the 500. What year is this for you covering the 500?
51st. Well, 50. I started the Star in '68, but I really didn't write about it till '69. So I think because Roger said something to me the other day. He goes, "What was your first year?" I said, "Well, really '69. That's when I first started writing stories. I worked at the Star in '68 and answering the score phones, but they wouldn't let me write because I was a hack. I kind of
was a hack.
I kind of still am a hack, but it's interesting because I was talking to Danny Luganville on the phone the other day. He goes, "Can you believe it's been 50 years?" And he said, "Roger told Sunoco, we'll win the Indy 500 in 3 years. It took him 4. We'll win the Indy 500 in 3 years. It took him 4. And he says, 50 years later, he's still racing. Who would have ever dreamed that? Who would have ever thought this guy's still going to be doing this 50 years later? Which says a lot about him and his character and his drive and his passion. Because, I just remember, how many people... we're all eaten up by racing, and you got to work on cars here, and I did too. And there's something about Indy that gets a hold of you. But the first time his dad brought him here in '52 to watch the race. That was it. He was like, "I'm going to be part of that race someday." And he could have driven a car and decided, "Now I'm going to be a businessman." And Mario got his ride. Both careers turned out okay, I think.
And that was how Roger Penske changed the Indy 500. You can catch this series and more than 500 episodes at the brand new MarshallPruittPodcast.com site. All brought to you by Cooper Tires, the Justice Brothers, and Bell Racing Helmets.